Hello, you are listening to On The Topic, and this week I'm grabbing my DeLorean and I'm going back to the 23rd of January 2019. I'm Dan.
And apparently I need to go and speak to someone about my troubled childhood watching 18-rated films as a 10-year-old. I'm Alex, and well, this week we are doing another Vault episode, aren't we, Dan?
We are.
And we are going back into the back catalogue, the weekly Roundup days, to bring forward one of our most popular, I guess, episodes. It's got quite a nice rating, plenty of downloads and streams. And it's your favourite films, Vol. 1.
Yeah, really good episode.
Lots of fun, actually.
So much so that we've had so many spin-offs from this episode as well. We did favourite 90s films, favourite noughties, favourite films of the last decade, and of course we've had all the other spin-off episodes as well.
Yeah, we've had favourite children's TV shows. We've had loads. So yeah, it's a really good episode. We listened to it in readiness for this drop, and I really enjoyed it.
It's quite fascinating to see how far we've come as podcasters as well. Yeah,
although I must say it sounds like I had a lot of fun putting it together. I know I did in terms of getting, different clips, but there's some really cool kind of sound bites in there, and I think we're covered from copyright. We'll see what YouTube says when we load that on in a couple of months' time. But it was a lot of fun, and we've obviously matured and come a long way. But it's still a really good episode. I really enjoyed listening to it.
It's been nearly 5 years.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Madness.
We're not far off from doing our birthday episode.
No.
But this one, I mean, we're not going to obviously talk too much about it, because hopefully you'll continue in a couple of minutes' time to go on to listen to the original. But when was it again, Dan? The date, do you remember?
It was the 23rd of January 2019.
Crikey, there you go, listener. He's always got the facts and figures. And we cover, was it 3 films, favourites each, isn't it?
Yeah, so we did 3 each, and then we got quite a lot of listener interaction on this one.
It's a really good discussion. And I think I reflected that most of my films actually weren't age appropriate. But hey, it was a different time in the 90s, and I make no apologies. And they're still my favourite films, Dan. Like, they haven't changed, which I'm not sure if I was expecting them to, but since I guess COVID and people looking for that sense of comfort, I think it's still true back in 2019, even more so is now, that I don't really yearn too much for the new stuff. I need that comfort and that security of the familiar. So I still go and put on, X film Y. I won't spoil it. X film Y film, because I'll know it frame by frame, script by script, but I still enjoy watching it. And that's really what we're talking about here, listener, is they are our favourite, not because it has a particular great scene or a fantastic line. All those are valid, but you can watch it time and time again and not become bored. And I think the true test is, and we talked about this before on the pod, Dan, that for me, when I know I'm truly engaged, when I don't head for that device, I don't get distracted, I don't get broken in my concentration. And that invariably happens with films that are my favourite films I've seen 100 times before, not the new ones. That's really odd.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's so strange, but that's for me is the true test of why that is my favourite film, because it still captures my attention.
Something else we've talked about in the past as well. These are the sorts of films that I would pick up when I'm ill. It's that comfort, isn't it?
Disaster films. That was a great episode too.
Yeah, especially when hangovers. Yeah. So that's a good episode to dive into.
It is.
But I think one of our listeners actually told us on one of our episodes that if you're trying to dive into something new and you're feeling a bit ill, it's like that. There's like an anxiety level. You can't quite sort of dial into that film.
No.
Whereas something like this, where you're familiar with it and you've seen it a million times, you don't pick up your phone, it's just comfort.
It is. And that's all we'll talk about, listener. So if nothing else, sit back and relax and enjoy some comfort, because we all talk about our favourites, as Dan said, some of yours. And look, we'll no doubt, we haven't done a volume 2, have we?
No.
So we're probably well overdue. So look, there's plenty of time to get in contact and share your favourite films, are getting on the conversation, and we'll have the contact details in the episode description below. But otherwise, I guess this is another stellar episode from the weekly Roundup days.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
And dive in.
Hello, Razders, and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Roundup with, I'm Alex.
And I'm Dan.
And this week we are very excited for you to join us on our most favourite all-time films, because this is a long time coming. We've talked about this, I think, for some time.
It's been a couple of months on our social media, and we've always been trying to put the feelers out there to get your reaction, and we've had quite a good response on this one as well. We
certainly have, to the point where I think the latter half of this episode is going to be all about you. So we've always said your podcast, your views.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it certainly is. So I guess I'll kick us off, Dan, in terms of, first of all, when I talk about my most favourite films of all time, you would naturally think that in my top 3 that we're going to talk about today is going to be full of Marvel films.
Yep.
But they're not.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I've chosen these particular films is because it's a mix between any film that I could happily put on now and watch all the way through, really, without grabbing my phone and flicking through. I'm sure you do it, listener, from time to time. You know what the scene's coming up, so you can phase out, pick up your phone, have a quick. I mean, it's terrible, isn't it, of 2018, 2019, modern day, where you do phase out and not concentrate on what you're watching, but we all do it, no doubt. So the films that I've chosen are the kind of films that I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I've seen it hundreds of times, but it still captures my attention.
Yeah.
I still love it. And then the other part for me, the reason why I've chosen these films is because they're so nostalgic. Or perhaps, they are different from the churn that comes out in the cinema these days. So I guess I'm coming at very much from being an 80s, 90s child. But make it absolutely clear, none of my top 3 feature a Marvel film.
Mine only features 1.
Okay.
However, there is a big reason behind that, and we'll get to that shortly.
Okay, so perhaps if I kick us off, this isn't necessarily rank order, but I would suggest this is probably actually my number 1, is the 1988 classic Die Hard.
I watched this before Christmas. So my other half had homework set for her. So she had an operation just before Christmas, and one of her colleagues said, when you go home and you're recovering, you need to watch Die Hard, because my other half had never seen it before.
And it's a Christmas film.
Absolutely.
Although there's some controversy on the internet about actually whether it really is. But for me, if it features a Christmas tree, it's snowing, and it's set around Christmas, guess what? It's a Christmas film. So anyway, yes. So she had some homework to do.
So I downloaded it and we watched it together, and she also agreed it's a Christmas film.
Amazing.
Yep. So why is this one of your favourites?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, for me, it was my first early introduction to the silver screen. I should probably say early doors. I think it's definitely a 15, if not an 18, when it was first released in 88. And if you do your maths, if I'm talking, I was an 80s, 90s child, I definitely wasn't of age to watch this film. But hey, parental guidance and everything. This was one of my most favourite films as I was growing up as a wee nipper, age 10. He says rather nervously. And it's because it gives you the feeling of a have-a-go hero. And what I mean by that is, so if you haven't seen the film, I mean, I'm not going to say the spoiler alerts, because you've had nearly 30 years to watch this. An NYPD officer, so based in America, New York, attempts to save his wife after several of her and her colleagues are taken hostage in a large skyscraper.
Yeah.
At a Christmas party. The building's on lockdown. He goes along with his wife as her plus one. Some terrorists take control in the bid to steal some money from this large corporation, and of course he reluctantly, I must add, has to take on terrorists directly. And that's why I say it's have a go hero, because he's very reluctant to take them on. He's off the clock. He sees this as a massive inconvenience. Of course it would be. You want to enjoy yourself at a Christmas party. You do not want to be shooting terrorists. And it's played by Bruce Willis. And for me, Bruce Willis at that time, and still probably is one of the most quintessential action heroes of Hollywood.
Yeah, totally agree.
Him or Arnold Schwarzenegger, them for me are the original action heroes. So you put that all together, and for me, you have one of the most memorable action films to date. And nothing for me compares to what's come out in cinemas probably in the last 10, 15 years. Gets close to this absolute classic.
Alan Rickman makes a great villain as well.
Yeah, and I think that's also for me why this is such a good film, because yes, you have Bruce Willis, who is charismatic, he's grumpy, he really is reluctant, not because he's scared, but because he just can't be bothered to waste his time with these individuals. But the charisma that Bruce Willis has, John McClane is the character, with Hans Gruber, who is played by Alan Rickman, is phenomenal. And there's this edgy, gritty kind of banter between the two.
I'm very sorry, Hans. I didn't get that message. Maybe you should have put it on the bulletin board. But I figured since I waxed Tony and Marco and his friend here, I figured you and Carl and Franco might be a little lonely, so I wanted to give you a call.
How does he know so much about this?
This is very kind of you. I assume you are a mysterious party crasher. You are most troublesome for a security guard.
Sorry, Hans, wrong guess. Would you like to go for double jeopardy where the scores can really change?
And of course it's edgy because people are held hostage, and John McClane is running around shooting Hans Gruber's colleagues, and he's not happy about it.
Hans Gruber delivers one of my favourite lines in this film as well. So he's just killed the owner of this business of where they are, and he just says it. He won't be joining us for the rest of his life. You almost expect him to say he won't be joining us for the rest of the evening, but no, he says this.
He won't be joining us for the rest of his life.
And I guess to that point, there's a number of scenes that probably, if you haven't even seen the film, you would have perhaps seen, clips of. There's just so many different times where it gets me right in the feels. I get goosebumps. There's one particular scene where there's glass everywhere. There's a particular exchange of gunfire, and John McClane survives it, takes out all of the baddies, and he's on the walkie-talkie to a policeman who is outside. He's got a bromance with a Sergeant Al Powell, played by Reginald VelJohnson, and he's talking about how he's survived and how he's taking out the bad guys. And as he's doing it, he's plucking out glass out of his feet, and there's this blood everywhere. It's so cringy, but it just goes to show just how hard this cat. He's almost like, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's a Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris is still, he is made out of titanium.
He's god tier action man.
But Bruce Willis, John McClane is a close second. There's another one where he ends up throwing a fire hydrant off the top of the roof and then using that as a swing to get off the roof into then a glass panel underneath, and obviously his bloodied feet as he's smashing against the glass panel to smash into the office. There's just blood-stained feet marks on the window, which is pretty grim. Hans Gruber, he meets his maker at the very end. John McClane, I think he tries to save him. He's got his arm down. He's grabbed him by the arm, and Hans Gruber's hanging off outside of the skyscraper. And then he's then let go, and you just see Alan Rickman slowly falling to his death. And then an interesting tidbit for you, actually, Dan. Do you know how they got almost a seemingly genuine look of fear and shock in Alan Rickman's face as he's dropped? Seemingly, obviously, it's not from that height. It's going to be green screen, but from that scene.
Do you know what? I don't.
Apparently, what the director said was, right, Alan, when you're ready, we're going to drop you, so make sure you're ready for when we do it. And he said that we're going to do it on the count of 3. And he said 1, 2, dropped him.
Oh,
so Alan Rickman was expecting a 3,
brutal,
and he genuinely shit himself because he was dropped on 2. So if you ever want to scare someone, set them up for a 1, 2, 3 count, and then drop them or do something on 2. For me, if that wasn't enough, there is plenty more reason as to why that's one of my favourite films. I could talk all the time on it, but I won't. But I mean, there are 3 other Die Hard films. Die Hard 2, which was made I think 2 years later, quite good, but it's all set in an airport. I won't go into too much detail on that. Third one is with Samuel L. Jackson, who we are fans here of the weekly roundup. That one's very good. Again, it follows on from the storyline of the film we're talking about, where Hans Gruber's, I think it's cousin, enacts his revenge on the city of New York and John McClane specifically. So that's a stronger sequel. And then you've got Die Hard 4.0, which we should just probably forget ever existed. Tell a lie, there's another one after that, where his son is in Russia, and he's got to go to Russia to break his son out. But that one's the weakest of them all. They are doing another one, so that makes it 6, and it's called John McClane, or something very, very simple. But there's no kind of synopsis that's been released just yet, and I don't think they've started principals photography. So, if anything, watch the first one if you haven't already seen it, and probably the third one. You can get away with 1 and 3, and forget everything else. It's all filler. But I think I'm starting pretty strong here, Dan, on my films. But how about what's your first one?
So mine's based around a bit of nostalgia. So my dad made me watch this when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and this is one of those films that just appears on TV all the time. And like you say with Die Hard, if it's on, it catches your attention.
Yeah.
You'll naturally watch it, and it's something you won't get bored of. But I absolutely adore the trilogy. But I can start off with the first film, which is the sci-fi classic from 1985. Back to the Future. Absolutely love this film. So you've got Michael J. Fox's Marty McFly and Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Emmett Brown. So naturally this is set in 1985, where Dr. Emmett Brown's modified a DeLorean. So you'll be familiar with the phrases like flux capacitor and such. And
88 miles an hour, is it?
88 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Why not faster? Who knows? I've got an 88 miles per hour, and I certainly haven't travelled back or forward in time.
How disappointing!
I'm disappointed.
But have you checked your flux capacitor? Is that working correctly?
No, probably not.
That might be.
So it sort of sets you off in a car park where they're about to conduct these experiments. So they send the dog forward in time by about a minute, and that works. And then you get some terrorists that come and...
These pesky terrorists, they're always here to spoil the party, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But the funny thing is these terrorists only pop up once, and that's it.
Oh.
But they shoot Emmett Brown, and then you've got Marty McFly's like, oh my god, I need to escape. What am I going to do? He climbs into the DeLorean, ladies and gentlemen, and
puts his foot down,
hits 88 miles per hour, and ends up in 1955.
Oops.
Yeah, so in 1955 he ends up meeting younger versions of his parents. So, of course, you've probably done something wrong and you've made your mum fancy you.
Oh, so there's a bit of an Oedipus complex going on here.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gross.
So he has to make his parents fall in love again, otherwise he'll cease to exist. And, more dauntingly, he has to go back to 1985 to save the doc.
So if that wasn't enough, all that pressure of being erased from time and your mum hitting on you, which is a bizarre concept to say out loud, you've got to save Doc from getting shot. Yeah,
absolutely. Like I said, I love the sequels. Number 3, not so much as the other two. The second one, they go forward in time to... I can't remember what year it was now. It was in the 2000s, and we've got past this.
I think it was 2015?
Yeah, where they had hoverboards and flying cars.
Self-tying Nike shoes, which they have actually made. That it is a fact. You can put your feet into these shoes and they automatically tighten. So they've made the shoes from Back to the Future.
Still waiting for the jacket that blows you dry though when you get wet.
Yeah, that would come in useful, especially for your commute to work, no doubt.
Yeah, hasn't really rained on me much walking to work these days, but now we're in winter.
Yeah. And hoverboards, they have actually started to try and create maglev technology, so it's not quite as the film predicted, but some of the technology there we have started to make.
Yeah.
Prophetic.
Absolutely love these films, and if you haven't watched the trilogy, please do, and let us know what you think of Back to the Future. But like I say, this goes back to when I was 6. My dad made me watch them, and whenever I see them now, I always watch them now. It always catches my attention. I have to sit there and I have to watch the Adventures of Marty McFly and Emmett Brown.
Amazing.
So what's next on the list?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, we have talked about James Bond before, more from a news perspective of the next actor who picks up the Walther PPK. But for me, I grew up with. It sounds quite a violent upbringing. On retrospect, maybe I need to speak to someone about this. I grew up on the James Bond films because they were always on, say, Sunday afternoons. And my dad always used to tape them. I'm not sure if taping surely was...
Oh, the VHS.
Yeah, was against copyright. But anyway, we all did it back in the 90s, and he used to tape them for me. And one of my most favourite ones was The Spy Who Loved Me.
Good film. Now,
it's a 1977 classic. It's the 10th Bond film in the franchise. And this one was played by Sir Roger Moore, should I say. And this one saw a billionaire evil genius named Carl Stromberg, strong name there, who planned to destroy the world and create a new civilization under the sea. Which you're thinking, this sounds nuts. This is a nonsense storyline, but for me, it really does work, and to the point where he teams up with a Russian agent, Anya Amasova, to stop Stromberg. And I think of all of the Bond films, I think there's now 26, is there? There's quite a few. Dan's furiously typing, googling as we speak. I'm going to go with 26. Let's see if I'm correct. But of all of the Bond films, for me, this is the archetypal James Bond film. The reason being is you've got the suaveness of Sir Roger Moore. He just oozes charisma and sophistication of the character, which for me I think is probably one of the most closest depictions of the novels. He globetrots, so he's in Egypt, he's in Italy, he's in the Bahamas, and you've got the megalomaniac of Stromberg. He truly is insane.
That they were the best Bond films as well.
Most definitely. Stromberg, people tend to forget because he's only in one film. He's not part of Spectre, or as we knew it before, Spectre in the original 60s and 70s films, where you got Blofeld with his cat. That is what everyone remembers as one of the big baddies of the James Bond kind of franchise. But Stromberg for me was one of the most dangerous because he's not looking to pitch different countries against each other in nuclear war, or looking to corner the arms industry. This man is literally looking to decimate the earth and create a new civilization under the sea, which is absolutely nuts. But that's not the only reason why I like the film. It's got some fantastic scenes. For instance, in this submergible base, so it can come out of water and then submerge underwater, that Stromberg has, he's got a particular quaint way of getting rid of those who perhaps he needs to make disappear. Have you seen the film? Do you remember how he perhaps dispatches his enemies?
I haven't seen this film for a while, but I do own all the Bond films.
Okay, bit of homework.
Go home and I'll do this as homework.
Bit of homework for you there, Dan.
I've furiously tapped away on my phone to Google. You weren't far off. It was 24 Bond films.
Close enough.
Close, but no cigar.
No cigar. So Stromberg actually dispatches his enemies, or those who are against him, he has a disagreement with a particular woman. I think she's leaking information to foreign powers. I think it's the Russians now, part of his entourage, and he suspects her, and he asks her to go and fetch something. So she goes into a lift, the doors close, and a trapdoor opens underneath her. She falls down a chute into a pool of sharks.
Do they have lasers on their heads?
They do not have lasers on their heads, but they still are sharks, and she is shark food.
Oh no, that was Austin Powers, the sharks with lasers on their heads. My bad.
To a point in a later scene where James Bond actually confronts Stromberg under the guise of someone who's interested in ecological affairs. He notes in the corner of his eye in the fish tank that there is an arm that's been severed just sat there at the bottom of the fish tank, which gives away that this chap isn't perhaps your nature-loving, save the planet enthusiast as he's giving out. And then we've got Jaws. I'm not talking about the shark now. Are you familiar with the character Jaws, Dan?
Yeah, he's the guy with the metal teeth.
Yes.
I remember him from Moonraker.
Yeah, which I think is tongue-in-cheek and a follow-up to this film.
Yeah, it was, if I remember rightly, because Moonraker, they go up to space, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
They've got the Moonraker lasers.
They do. I absolutely detest that film because I think they took the franchise in a dreadful direction, but thankfully it was a blip in the grand scheme of things. But yes, we're first introduced to Richard Keel's most iconic role. And one of the most favourite scenes where he's in an Egyptian club, James Bond is to meet a contact, and the contact I think goes to make a phone call or something, and he's gone for quite a while.
Yep.
And the scene almost climaxes where there's an Egyptian dancer twirling around, and it's quite a high tempo scene, to the point where James Bond gets up with the music blaring. Now it's at a high tempo, and he suddenly finds this contact slumped dead in this phone booth, and he goes to check on him, and he's got this bite mark on his neck. Yeah,
he was quite notorious for biting people's throats.
He's a modern vampire, so that's quite graphic for a James Bond film. But Jaws, he's really quite strong. He's a tall chap, and he's got these metal teeth that can seemingly bite and kill anyone. So he's quite the formidable opponent for James Bond. And this is the first time we see Richard Keel as that character.
Shandor?
Yes, sir?
Jaws. I'm assigning you the task of recovering the microfilm copy of the tracking system. Shandor, you will go with him. Obey him. Every person who even comes into contact with that microfilm is to be eliminated.
For me, it's an absolute classic. I love the film. I watch it, and I do watch it time and time again. If you haven't seen it, Spy Love Me, 1977. Don't be put off. I think it's still, although obviously it's from a different era, different time, it's still one of the best Bonds. Actually, a fun fact there, Dan, before we look to your next film. So Roger Moore, who obviously played the role of the MI6 agent over 7 films, tried wherever possible to avoid using guns in the scenes.
Really?
So next time you watch a Roger Moore James Bond film, have a look, and what he tends to do is a karate chop or a slap or some kind of manoeuvre that avoids shooting a gun. The reason being is Sir Roger hates firearms.
Oh, okay.
Which you think, hang on a minute, Alex, you're talking nonsense. But it was well known that he would often speak to the director or the screenwriter and say, look, you need to be not making me fire guns because I'm against it. I don't agree with gun violence or with how liberal the world is in terms of getting a hold of firearms, and wherever possible he tried to avoid it. So have a look out, because Sir Roger Moore, I think, is a man ahead of his time.
Bit of homework for me and the listeners.
Yeah, if only people listen to him, 30 years on. But anyway, that's enough about me. What's your next one?
Next up for me is another sci-fi classic, and it is 1980 Star Wars Empire Strikes Back.
Now this is probably the most favourite of the Star Wars films of my own. I think a lot of people share that as well, Dan.
Yeah, so again, my dad got me into the Star Wars films, and I'm going way back to probably around 1995, and my dad bought me the VHSs for my birthday and Christmas that year.
Oh, was that one of the director's remastered editions from George Lucas?
And still looks a bit dodgy on VHS, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Timeless classic for me.
Absolute classic.
I mean, you've got Mark Hamill, who reprises his role as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo,
yep,
and the late Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. So it's just such a dark film, essentially, because you always sort of see the downfall of the good guys, and this is what makes trilogies like this so exciting. And I sort of touched on this with John Wick 2 in a previous episode. But you start off on the ice planet Hoth, and you've got the AT-AT walkers coming in, just blasting everything, and you've got the rebels that are trying to hold them back, and they have to retreat. They go off, and Luke Skywalker ends up going to Dagobah instead, and he meets Yoda to train for the ultimate battle against Darth Vader. And then you got Han, Leia, Chewie, etc. on which planet was it? With all the sort of, they're in the air, aren't they? They're in like the sky.
Oh, Bespin.
That's it.
Bespin Cloud City, yeah, where they meet Lando
Calrissian, who's a bit of a dodgy geezer, as it turns out, and he sort of stabs them in the back a little bit, doesn't he?
He does. He sells them down the river.
Darth Vader turns up, and I think this is where it sort of leads into one of my favourite scenes, where you see Luke go there.
Yep. And
he takes on Darth Vader.
He does, yeah. I think at somewhere in the depths of the city, they duel. They have an out, which is, well, I won't steal the mic drop for you, Dan. You're no doubt going to do the big reveal.
It's so good. So they're fighting, and then Luke gets sucked out the window, or was it Darth that got? No, Darth Vader gets sucked out this window, and Luke goes out to follow.
I believe so.
And anyway, so they carry on fighting onto this platform. Darth Vader cuts Luke's hand off.
Clean off. His wrist is severed from his hand, and his hand just goes floating off into the sky below.
And you get that iconic phrase,
"I am your father."
And it's that really, I think, was, no one saw it coming back in the day. Unfortunately, you can't get away from it. It's now sewed into our social being. Everyone knows what Star Wars. Everyone knows that Darth Vader is obviously Luke's father. So I already knew at that stage kind of what was going on. But it's one of the biggest reveals of movie history.
And it's a shock and awe moment. You don't expect it if you're watching it for the first time, but obviously the more you watch it, I say it's a timeless classic, and I love watching this film.
Yeah,
again, it's one of those films that's always on ITV.
But for good reason. I think you're right, Dan. When you look at the first film, where it is all happy days, we've blown up the Death Star, we're all going to be riding off into the sunset on our Millennium Falcon. Because we've won, and actually this film is, you haven't, and you're on the back foot, you're running away, and now Luke, you've lost your arm.
Yeah.
So what's next for our band of intergalactic heroes?
I mean, this comes close to Return of the Jedi for me, but Empire Strikes Back always stands out because of how dark and that downfall of the heroes, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, if you haven't watched Empire Strikes Back,
where have you been?
Where have you been for the last 30, 40 years?
I mean, a lot of our listeners perhaps aren't that old, but it's still, as I say, it's part of society. It's part of our makeup. So you should really have a look and see what all this pop culture is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah, my last one. So this, you may not have heard this actually, Dan, and a lot of our listeners would say, really? But bear with me. This is Enemy of the State.
I've heard of this film.
1998, directed by Tony Scott. So this is a well-known director. It's got played by Will Smith.
Yep.
So Will Smith is the main lead on it. He plays a character called Robert Dean, who is inadvertently chased by the NSA, which he has evidence which is placed upon him. He's not aware of it, which incriminates the Secret Service and political figures. And so it's the government actually laying waste to Will Smith's life entirely, turns it upside down. They incriminate him in various crimes. They are checking CCTV. They are bugging his phones. Every step of the way, he is hounded and chased down. It's for me, it's one of the best political thrillers of the time. And it starred Gene Hackman as Edward Lyle, who's off the grid and reluctantly helps Robert Dean, and John Voight and many more also star in that film. And it's all about the coming of the modern age of technology, and actually just how powerful it is, which I think, given where things are, and our data is so important these days. If you look at the Facebook scandals, we are willingly giving our data away, but do we know why and what it's being used for? And this film is echoes of what's to come, and it's all about how you're being tracked by CCTV and your phone's being bugged, and the NSA, and let's face it, all the governments are listening to our conversations. It makes you really sound like a paranoid hack.
You know how many federal agents you had following you on that ferry?
I don't...
Who are you working for?
What are you talking about? I'm not working.
Is this about me? Am I a target here? Do they know me?
Who is they?
Do they know me?
I don't know what you're talking about!
You're either very smart or incredibly stupid.
But fantastic film, and for me, one of the best. I mean, there's plenty of chase scenes. This is a thriller, right? He's trying to escape the clutches of the government. But and we don't need a spoiler alert for this. But at the very end, Robert Dean, again played by Will Smith, confronts a local gangster as part of one of the final side plot threads, and ends up in a bloody shootout in an Italian restaurant. And he's cowering underneath a table. And I think two rival gangs. It's the gangsters, and then some bent government bodies who believe that this gangster has what they need. And Will Smith's played them off, and he's cowering underneath this table. He's got the tablecloth around him. There's just a scene of him under the table, and there's the gun flashes going off the other side of the tablecloth, and the camera's shaking, and it's just so raw, gritty, and violent. And after he arises underneath the tablecloth, there's just a sea of bodies and a massacre, and he just scurries away after seemingly getting rid of, killing two birds with one stone, because he's got gangsters on his tail as a side plot thread, as well as the government. So the scene's just phenomenal, and the film is so good. As I say, it'll probably make you paranoid, but all for the good reasons. I think we need to be more aware of what we are doing with our data, and this again is ahead of its time. But a fantastic thriller. If you're into a little bit of action and perhaps a little bit of prophecy here, the 1998 classic Enemy in the State with Will Smith, who plays a serious role. This isn't a comedy. This isn't Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Men in Black. This is him playing a serious role. Do check it out. And again, for me, that's why this is in my top 3, because I can put it on all the live long day, and I think it still holds up. I mean, there are some 90s, 2000 kind of references and clothing styles, but I think there's still messages today that hold up, and for me that's why it's an absolute classic.
Bit of homework for me, because I don't think I've seen that film yet.
There you go.
So last up for me, I mean, this will come as no surprise to you or our listeners, is 2008's Iron Man.
Yes, what started it all off?
So you got Robert Downey Jr., the Godfather himself, as Tony Stark, Jon Favreau, who also directed it, as Happy Hogan, Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts. Now, if anyone's unfamiliar with Iron Man, you got Tony Stark, who's a billionaire industrialist and inventor.
Philanthropist as well.
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
I'm not even going to try and say that word. So he's overseas testing his weapons, and he ends up getting kidnapped by some terrorists. Who wanted to build something devastating?
Those darn terrorists again. They just keep on cropping up.
I mean, they're in Die Hard. They're in Back to the Future, and now they're in Iron Man. Jesus,
they get around.
And instead of building these devastating weapons for the terrorists, he builds himself an armour.
Sneaky.
Of armour. And then he returns to America, refines that suit of armour and combats crime and terrorism. But yeah, this is the one Marvel film I can keep going back to without being bored. This is where it all began, and it just holds your attention throughout the whole film. And every time I watch it, I know what's going to happen, but I still sit there and I'm like, oh my god, what's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the soundtrack is so good. The music, I mean, it starts off with AC/DC Back in Black, which is such a number to open a film on, and he's riding in the Humvee. I think he's in Iraq. As he's attacked, but the music all the way through is absolutely phenomenal. The screenplay is pretty good as well, and the charisma with the characters. I mean, it's so on point with the original 50s, 60s comics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But made in the modern image. And I think that's why for us, at least, I'm now speaking for you, Dan, but I think we've discussed before, that's why the MCU is just so good, because they are bringing these characters from the comic book world, but making it meaningful to now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favourite moments is where he's in that cave and he's building that suit of armour, and then he comes out and he just takes them all out. He's got flamethrowers and he's just punching people, and then he just sort of shoots off up in the air, and then he crash lands in the desert somewhere, and this armour's just everywhere.
It's fallen to bits, and he's clambering out of a hole, but seemingly miraculously survives, because that would have been a very short film if he hadn't.
I mean, the great thing about that first piece of armour as well, the Mark 1, it looks almost identical to what we saw in the comics when Iron Man made his debut.
Yeah.
But it's such a good film.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this one.
And, you know, as we know, that would spark what is a multi-billion-pound money spinner now for Marvel. Well, now Marvel Disney.
And when we're 10 years on now, and we're expecting Captain Marvel in February, March, and Endgame in April.
And Downey Jr. is still reprising the role, so he's clearly having a lot of fun with it, and I know that a lot of people love that character. So I mean, time will tell as to whether or not he still continues. 10 years is a long time to dedicate your life to a character of this ilk, but he loves playing it. He's always said that. Whether or not he could actually give that up, I don't know.
It essentially resurrected his career as well, and when you think he was on drugs and booze, and he's almost like a real life Tony Stark, which is
he's turned it around.
Why he portrays it so well is
he can resonate with that character.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's it for me. So we're going to go on to the listeners.
Yeah, so there's listeners' corner. So you've been emphatic about this. We've got quite a few comments, recommendations, and messages that you shared with us. So where do you want to start, Dan?
So my other half sent me in with her top 3 favourite films.
Oh, yeah.
She said if I didn't mention these, she probably would kill me.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm going to mention them so I don't
come to your untimely end. Yeah.
Untimely end. So first up for her is Emperor's New Groove. Now, I've seen this film countless of times because she loves it this much.
Disney
film?
Yep.
For me, definitely one of the more underrated ones. So you got Yzma and Kronk, who are the villains. And then you've got, I can't remember the Emperor's name, but he turns into a llama, and
is it based in the Aztecs? Are they Aztecs?
Yeah. But Yzma and Kronk are just the best villains. But they're also bad eggs. But Kronk's just sort of her goofy sidekick. But yeah, it's a brilliant film. I'd recommend you check this one out. I think it was released in 2000.
Okay. Yeah.
Next up was Marilyn Monroe's How to Marry a Millionaire.
Oh yeah.
I've not seen this one, but my other half says this is her career-topping moment in the film industry.
Right.
And then last but not least is Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman.
Of course, yes. We cover this off, albeit briefly, in the last episode. for me, it's one of my most favourite DCU films. Ignore all the other ones. I haven't seen Aquaman yet, notwithstanding, but she does an absolute marvellous job of this in World War II, I guess. Great film. I think she does it a fantastic justice, and it's a perfectly put together film. So yeah, I can't understand why she might think that way.
I mean, I love Wonder Woman as well, and whenever I watch it, I always compare it to Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah,
very sort of similar. So good especially when she jumps out the trench and runs at these Germans with rifles, and they're just shooting her, and she just takes them all out. Such a good film.
Yeah, it's great.
Next up, we've got Jake Lane, and he has mentioned Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh yeah.
Again, a great film.
Absolute epic.
Sean Bean also meets another demise in another film.
Yeah, he gets dispatched with arrows, I seem to remember. He's got like 12 arrows in his chest, and he meets his end at the very end of the film in a wood and dies a very sad, lonely death.
Yeah, sad times. We've also got Avengers Infinity War. Understandably.
Okay, yeah. All the Marvel characters come together to climactic and questionable end.
It's one of these films I've got to be in the mood for. It's just...
There's a lot going on.
It
is one of my favourites, but I'm not sure if it quite take my top 3 for those reasons, Dan.
Yeah.
There's lots of dialogue. There's lots of different side threads, and you've really got to be concentrating.
Yeah, let's not take it away from Jake.
No, thank you for getting in contact, Jake. But
he also mentions Logan as well, which again, very dark. Great. It's a great exit for Hugh Jackman in the Fox franchise.
Yeah. And this sees in the future a Wolverine being one of the final survivors of, I think, all the X-Men, and he's got to save the life of a young... Is it an X-23?
Yes. Laura, I think her name was, wasn't it?
Yeah, she's also got claws. She's a feral mutant, and he's got to try and get her... I think it's in New Mexico or something similar, and they're being chased by obviously the baddies, and he meets his end in quite a graphic way. I think is he not impaled on a branch of some description? He no longer has his healing factor, just doesn't work anymore. He's far too old, he bites the big one.
This is quite bold as well, because my other half always says that I'm like a rock and I'm just emotionless to films, like when someone dies. But Logan was probably one of the only films I've actually drawn tears to watching that final scene.
Because it's a culmination of just so many years of that actor playing that role, and I think it's very well handled. Interesting enough, they have done a noir version, a black and white version.
Yes,
which I've heard it's even better, because it actually gives you more focus on the screenplay, and the action. Obviously, you don't see the spray of the blood. It's more gritty, and apparently it's a better viewing experience. So that's on my to-do list. But yeah, there's a black and white version which apparently is absolutely phenomenal.
Need to check that out myself, actually. I haven't seen it since it came out in the cinema, so I'll have to revisit that one. We've got Kyle up with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah, Jim Carrey.
Not familiar with that film. I've not seen it.
No, I haven't, but fun enough, a lot of people that I have come across and spoken about films with have mentioned this, that it's a defining film of their consciousness. When they say what's your favourite film, they do say that, and it's more than a couple of people now. So I haven't seen it, but then Carl's not alone, and I think it's just another one to add to the to-do list.
Absolutely. Memento, again, a film I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
And last up for Kyle, now I think you'll probably love this film as much as I do, is The Dark Knight.
Yes, very good. Christian Bale reprising the role as Batman. Gritty, dark, not quite as dark as the Batman films of the 80s, but this is a different take on the character. And I think when people talk about Batman, they're not talking about you know, the more recent depiction, they're talking about this trilogy, and totally with this guy. They're great films, and it's great lovable characters and storylines.
Heath Ledger as well probably portrays arguably my favourite Joker of our time as well.
Definitely.
He's so good. Such a shame he passed away shortly after this film, but wonderful film, and a great choice.
Absolute masterpiece.
Next up, we've got Hugo Torres from Twitter.
Hugo. Thank you for getting in contact. What does Hugo say?
Now, he gave us a few. Again, he gave us The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Then Raiders of the Lost Ark.
All right, yeah, Harrison Ford.
Another Harrison Ford film.
This is the second...
Yeah, this is the second one. Is this the one where it opens up and he's running and the boulders behind him, or was that a different one?
I believe it is, and this is all about searching for the Ark of the Covenant, which the Nazis are looking to uncover and to gain the power of, so that they can ultimately shift the tide of the war. Do you remember how Nazis meet their end in that film, Dan?
I don't, unfortunately. I'm sure this film was on over Christmas as well.
Yeah.
And I started watching it, but sadly over Christmas, listener, I was very poorly. And
You're a bit poorly, weren't you?
A bit zonked out on paracetamols and...
So you could have been watching anything.
I could have been watching anything.
To jog your memory, there's a particular scene where the Nazis open the Ark, the lid of the gold case is lifted, the power of, I think it's God, is blasted out, and all of the Nazis end up getting fried. And there's a particular scene where one of the main baddies, his face melts.
Yes, I remember this now. Yeah,
which is quite graphic actually for those films. Usually they're slapstick in the true nature of Harrison Ford and his type of humour. But yeah, they meet quite an untimely end. Great film, good choice actually.
He also gave us 2001, ASO.
Yep.
Spaceballs.
Okay.
Not familiar with
I
this
haven't
film.
seen that one, but...
perhaps a bit of homework for us both.
Most definitely.
Lego Batman.
Okay.
I saw this at the cinema when it first came out. I was in Brighton at the time, and we went to the Odeon, where unfortunately it was a really cold, damp day. And the cinema was just as cold, and I don't...
Hopefully not just as damp.
No, it wasn't damp, but because it was so cold, I didn't really end up enjoying the film, and perhaps I need to sort of revisit it in warmer conditions.
Because there's a Lego Batman 2, dare I say, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's due at some point, but I know there's a Lego Movie 2 due this year, where we'll see Chris Pratt reprise his role in the film. But yeah, looking forward to that one. And last but not least, he also mentions Die Hard.
Classic.
It's a timeless classic, isn't it?
Most definitely. So perhaps we'll get off social media and perhaps go to our platform where we're hosted on Anchor, and we've got Howard who has left us a message. Let's have a little bit of a listen to what Howard says.
Hi guys, my name's Howard. Leaving a message for the first time. Like the show, very enjoyable. My favourite films, my top 3 favourite films, are Star Wars, and I'm cheating because I'm going to put the original trilogy as one film. My favourite is just very nostalgic to me. I used to watch them a lot as a child. My favourite scene is probably in Return of the Jedi, the Sarlacc pit, the sort of battle over the Sarlacc pit. It's just a great scene, despite the fact that the coolest character in Star Wars, Boba Fett, gets killed by a blind man with a stick. My second favourite film is probably Gladiator, and that's merely down to the sort of emotional impact it has, and the fact that the soundtrack is just probably one of the greatest cinematic soundtracks of all time.
So he's got 2 there. So Return of the Jedi back in 1983. So we already talked about Empire Strikes Back. This is the follow-up. Sees the rebellion overthrowing the might of the Empire in the cinematic battle on Endor with the little cuddly bears.
Oh, the Ewoks.
The Ewoks.
Yeah.
We also see Darth Vader without his helmet, his eventual demise, and the assumed death of the Emperor at the hands of Luke. and also Darth Vader, who turns upon his teacher. Again, it's Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, the late Carrie Fisher, and Billy D. Williams, and many more. Gladiator, 2000 film there. Russell Crowe as Maximus. Joaquin Phoenix, who of course is the new Joker.
Yep.
Plays Commodus, the evil emperor, as well as Connie Wilson and Oliver Reed. Good films, and of course Howard says that the soundtrack for Gladiator is particularly good. But what's his third film?
And I'd say my third favourite film of all time is probably Blade Runner. Again, this is mainly down to the soundtrack, I think, but the opening scene, sort of like it's set in the future, and the opening scene over the LA skyline is just an absolutely beautiful opening image of any film, and it's just got this amazing soundtrack, which is very of the time, but I still absolutely love it. I think it's by Vangelis. Anyway, guys, keep up the good work. Do enjoy listening to your podcasts, even if you do seem to rate Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom. After listening to that review, I wanted to smash my head against a wall, because that is one of the worst films I've ever seen at the cinema, and you guys seemed quite chipper about it. So very enjoyable. Thanks again. All the best. Take care. Bye bye.
And Blade Runner. So 1982, Ridley Scott. There is also a sequel, a more modern sequel. I think it was last year, but this one was Harrison Ford, Sean Rung, Rutger Hauer. Probably have done his name injustice, apologies, and many more. The film sees detective hunting down a rogue replicant, a robot, which has more philosophical implications for our hero, Rick Deckard, played by, again, Harrison Ford. So Harrison Ford keeps on cropping up in our top threes. Thank you for your submission, Howard. Just for absolute clarity, I'm not sure if we were quite so chipper as you put it about The Lost World. I think actually this is what we said. For me, if we had to give it a star rating, probably 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
A good outing, not a bad follow-up, but not as good as the original.
It's almost comfortable and safe.
But I have to agree.
That was quite a damning assessment for Howard, wasn't it?
But this is your views, your podcast. We're all always welcome to have other people's opinions, and as we always say, please do let us know whether you have a differing view or opinion. Interesting enough, let's see what Howard offers at the end of his message.
I think it'd also be wise to invite me onto your podcast to discuss films just for absolute bants. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Well, we'll have to see whether we are wise, Howard, and get you on. But thank you very much for your message. And if you like Howard, Anchor is a fantastic way of getting in touch with us and being part of the show. So please do sign up. It literally takes 5 minutes. It's a great platform to play your podcasts, your favourite channels, and it's a great way to get in contact with us. So please do record your messages for us at future episodes.
It'll be interesting to see what happens if we invite guests onto the show as well to talk about what they're interested in, and they can challenge us about our opinions while we're in the studio behind the mic. It could, I don't want to say get heated. I'm not going to offer anyone out for a fight. But
that's the second time in as many weeks that you've talked about taking people on.
Oh, I'm a weakling, really.
A new year, new Dan, perhaps a more fighty Dan.
I do bite. So we've got a couple more.
Oh yes.
So Mandy, hi mum. She has said Forrest Gump, absolute classic with Tom Hanks.
Soundtracks quality as well. The music is a great addition to the actual fantastic casting and screenplay as well. Great
I haven't
choice.
seen the film in such a long time, and I think I need to go back and watch it as well. Especially when he goes to Vietnam and he's in the war and he meets Lieutenant Dan. It's a great film, timeless classic.
Yeah.
Goodfellas, that's some kind of mafia film, if I remember rightly.
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas.
Yeah, Goodfellas. I think it's a late 80s, if not 90s film. I originally got it on a double-sided DVD. Are you aware of those?
No. I didn't know these even existed.
Neither did I. So when the film ended halfway through, I think it's about nearly 3 hours long, and it said, please turn over, I thought, what are you talking about? DVDs are not made to be turned over. You know, this isn't a tape, but sure enough, you turn it over and it picks up where it left off. It's that long. DVDs couldn't hold the image, so they had to print on both sides.
So it's not like now where you can literally just cram a film onto a disc now.
No.
Wow.
But quality choice. I have to agree with Mandy. It's one of the best gangster films. It's got all the greats in there. I think Joe Pesci's in there. Yeah, fantastic choice.
And last up was King Creole. Not familiar with this one.
No.
I'm surprised I probably haven't watched it if my mum's sending this in to us. Especially growing up. Like I say, my dad always introduced me to a lot of the films I know and love now, like Back to the Future and Star Wars. Last up is Chris.
Chris.
Now, interestingly, this does open up a potential episode for us in the future.
Oh, yeah.
So, first up is The Hangover. He says the first one's good, but the rest is rubbish. So, for future episodes, I think we need to talk about sequels that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Or shouldn't have happened.
I probably agree with him. The first one was a great foray into this type of humour. There's some great charisma between those characters. I might have to disagree to some extent, because I think the second one, which is the first one's in Vegas.
Yeah.
The second one is in Bangkok, Thailand.
I quite like the second one.
I do, just because there's lots of reference to small penises and and monkeys, which tells you my sense of humour, which is appalling. But nonetheless, I thought the second one was on par with the first, but agreed the third one unfortunately just fell short. That was a return to Vegas, so that one definitely shouldn't have been made.
Now, this is a bit of a classic, and I remember seeing this one at the cinema. Robin Williams' Flubber.
Yes, yeah.
That was a good film. The late Robin Williams was a brilliant actor.
Was that in 1992, I think, Flubber?
Flubber. Well, I want to say it was in the 90s. I think it might be 97
Oh, right.
or 98.
Okay.
Alex is furiously Googling away at this one. And then last up is Vinnie Jones's Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
Yes.
I remember this one. Again, I think I'm going back to sort of the late 90s with this one. It's quite gritty.
It is, yeah. Based in England.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite violent gangster flick. Good choice. My preference would be, though, Snatch, which was the later film.
Yeah.
But great choice. Yeah, Flubber was 1997. So well done, Dan. You nailed it.
Pointless film knowledge there, listener. I'm full of them, really. Like I say, when I'm at home and I'll say something like a random fact, my other half will always question why I know it. It's because I'm full of pointless knowledge.
But that's why we love you, Dan, and that's why you're on this podcast. So we've had plenty of feedback. So again, thank you for listening and for reacting to our social media requests and for getting involved. And this podcast is very much us sharing our thoughts and opinions, but it's even made better when we have so many people sending in their emails, social media, and voice messages. So please do continue to do that, because it just makes this so much more worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you ever have any news or anything you want us to share, please just let us know.
Yep.
And we'll throw it in this podcast.
I'll put in the description below all of the ways you can contact us, but we're on Facebook, Twitter,
Instagram,
and of course Anchor, which we'll continue to push, because it's, like Howard, is a great way to be part of the show. So if you want to leave us a voice message, please do get in contact.
And give Alex the laborious task of trying to rip that audio to put into the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. But for another week, I've been Alex.
Hi, I've been Dan.
And we'll see you next week.